Hello everybody, it's TannerFishies here, back again with a new Ninjago video here on the channel. In today's video we will be discussing once again the 2022 storyline of Ninjago, how it might tie in with the ending of Seabound, and how it will probably contain the Vengestone buyer himself, or herself, depending on who this character ends up being. Now in regards to this video right here, we are going to be specifically tackling the last elemental power, and how it might tie in with the Vengestone buyer to create the perfect villainous plan. So obviously with that being said, this video will just contain theories on my end, unless I specifically say that there is indeed confirmed information, which we will get to later on. We do have a couple of storylines that have been confirmed to be, I guess, a thing during 2022, so we're going to be discussing those as well later on. But just keep in mind, the majority of this video will indeed be my own opinion and my own theory, if you will. So the Vengestone buyer, a mysterious figure that has been collecting Vengestone quietly in the shadows throughout the past couple of Ninjago seasons. We first got word of the Vengestone buyer's antics during Master of the Mountain, when it was revealed that the Skull Sorcerer himself was going to be selling large quantities of Vengestone from Shintaro to some mysterious buyer. During the island, we didn't really get anything related to the Vengestone buyer, but in Seabound, we actually did. The opening minutes of Ninjago Seabound featured a character called Misdemeanor trying to transfer Vengestone from one place to another, probably working for this mysterious Vengestone buyer. In terms of the character itself, we don't really know a whole lot about who the Vengestone buyer is or who he could be, but there have been some theories. Lots of Ninjago fan theories suggest that the Vengestone buyer could indeed be a returning character. Some popular names include Pythor, the Time Twins, even Garmadon I've seen be proposed as a potential Vengestone buyer, and all of these characters might have their own reasons for purchasing Vengestone, but I feel like the Ninjago team is going to make the Vengestone buyer a brand new character. And considering how we have a couple of leftover storylines to tackle in the next year for Ninjago, I think it's safe to say that this character will indeed be an elemental master that we have not seen yet. Granted, this is of course under the impression that the last elemental power storyline and the Vengestone buyer arc will be concluded next season. We do know that the 2022 storyline will be a conclusion in some way, which might indeed be the ending of the Vengestone arc. We also know that the last elemental power will be discussed at some point, which is still something that we have not yet seen, even though it was teased even before the island came out. We hadn't heard anything like that from the island or Seabound, so it's very natural to suspect that the last elemental power will be introduced in the next season of Ninjago coming in 2022. In terms of what this power will be, I am willing to bet that the Vengestone buyer will indeed possess it. He might even be some type of ancient elemental master, or he might even be from the future, but we'll get to that later on. Now, in regards to what the power is, I'm going to be basing this off of a previous theory that I established. The theory that the Vengestone buyer will indeed be working with Ninjago police to obtain and capture the ninja. This is of course under the impression that the Ninjago city population doesn't really trust the ninja anymore following the destruction of their city after Wajira and Nia's battle during Seabound, and of course the police of Ninjago, or the government if you will, wouldn't really be super happy that their city was basically destroyed by some giant snake in the middle of some type of ninja conflict. Also, considering how Nia is probably one of the most powerful beings in the land of Ninjago currently, I think it's safe to say that the people of Ninjago will indeed be weary of her presence. This is especially true considering nobody really knows where she is. She could appear at any time and bring large amounts of danger with her. Now, of course, I've discussed all of that in previous videos. I suggest you watch some of my most recent ones if you want to get a little bit more insight regarding that theory. But regardless, if the Vengestone buyer is indeed going to be working with the Ninjago police to obtain the ninja, it would make sense that he would be trying to supply them with Vengestone. That would basically get rid of a huge threat for him if the ninja were to be obtained. But when you think about it within the context of the Ninjago story, the Vengestone buyer was supposedly purchasing Vengestone from King Vangelis all the way back during the events of Season 13. How would the Vengestone buyer know what was coming unless his elemental power allowed him to actually predict what was going to be happening in the future? I predict that the last elemental power will belong to the Vengestone buyer, and it will be some type of future sight or some type of future predicting power. I feel like we're going to be seeing a power very similar to that in the next season. If the Vengestone buyer had some type of future sight ability, the Ninjago TV series could have explained it away that he would have predicted Wajira's incoming attack. He would have seen what the future held for Ninjago City. As such, he would have started preparing. He would have started gathering Vengestone in order to better have a handle on the ninja themselves. If he predicted that Wajira would indeed flood Ninjago City, he could have also predicted that the police force and the population of Ninjago City would not really be super happy in the ninja. After all, their city was basically destroyed here, and this was probably the worst attack that Ninjago City has ever seen. As such, he could have easily predicted that the ninja themselves would indeed become targets, and he would begin to gather Vengestone to sell to the Ninjago police force in order to better apprehend the ninja and make his job a little little easier. The Vengestone buyer probably has some type of grudge over elemental beings, and if he wants to get rid of elemental powers, it would make sense that he would start with the strongest elemental beings in the land, those of course being the ninja. Let's just say that the last elemental power will indeed belong to the Vengestone buyer, and it will be some type of future sight or future predicting based power. What are some negatives for that? Well, for starters, it would be very similar to some other Ninjago elemental powers that we had seen previously, most notably the power of time from Acronix and Crux. Now, Acronix and Crux themselves, like I said earlier, are very much popular names when it comes to who the Vengestone buyer could be. I could very much see the Ninjago series making this new character some type of descendant, if you will, of Acronix and Crux. Maybe Crux has like a secret son or something that he's never told anybody about. That's kind of far-fetched when you think about it. But in regards to the actual power of a future sight ability, I don't think it would be super similar to time if they do it the right way. I know some aspects of time do allow people to see the future and predict the future. We also have things like the Sword of Sanctuary that will predict people's moves in a fight, but I think that the future sight ability, if it were to be obtained by the Vengestone buyer, would indeed be different than those types of powers. It would allow the user to predict things that would happen far into the future, and that would indeed explain how Vengestone was being collected over the course of the last several seasons in the background. If the future sight ability is to be implemented into the Ninjago series, I think it very much would make a lot of sense. The Vengestone buyer could have seen far into the future and realized what was coming. He could have seen Wajira's rampage and the impact that her rampage would have on Ninjago City, and he could have predicted that the people, including the government of Ninjago, would turn on the ninja in that regard, especially because, like I said in other videos, the ninja currently have one of their team members missing, and that particular team member holds an immense amount of power. I think it's safe to say that the Ninjago citizens would not really feel comfortable allowing somebody like that to just roam free. It seems to me like the Ninjago City police force will do their best to apprehend the ninja, and even go as far as to apprehend Nia, and the Vengestone buyer, using a future sight prediction, he could essentially manipulate the police force and use them to his advantage in order to get rid of the ninja and any other elemental being. This could be done for obvious reasons. Maybe the Vengestone buyer wants to be the only elemental master in the land, or maybe he just wants to be the land's sole protector. I mentioned in other videos how he could potentially be like a poser of sorts, like a false hero trying to parade himself around as some type of savior. I feel like having a character such as that in Ninjago would be pretty fun to see. And like I said, having the elemental power of a future sight be the Vengestone buyer's natural ability would indeed tie up a lot of loose ends. This would tackle the storylines of the corrupt police and the government of Ninjago being introduced, it would tackle the last elemental power which still needs to be introduced, and it would tackle that of the Vengestone buyer, and would probably conclude the Vengestone buyer arc. I mentioned earlier that having an elemental master from the future would also be beneficial. If the elemental master is from the future, he would have already seen Wajira's rampage. He would have already known that that would have been a thing. That probably would have been a thing in his timeline for several years. Maybe he's somebody that wants to go back in time and, in a way, try to stop the ninja from succeeding. Hence why he would be supplying his past self with a Vengestone or something to that degree, but then again, that is basically a copy and paste of Acronix and Crux, as opposed to a future sight ability, which would kind of be in the same category as Acronix and Crux's power, but it would be different enough to classify it as its own thing. If you had somebody coming back from the future, that would basically, like I said, be a copy and paste of Acronix and Crux, and probably would not go over well for Ninjago fans, unless it is Acronix and Crux themselves. Otherwise, I think it's more likely that the Vengestone buyer, if he is going to have an ability like this, it would probably be a future sight ability, or some ability to predict the future. I feel like giving the last elemental power to the Vengestone buyer is probably going to be the route that Ninjago goes, if Ninjago does indeed decide to make the Vengestone buyer a new character. If the Vengestone buyer ends up being an old character, I wouldn't be surprised. But regarding various trends that the Ninjago series seems to be adopting as of late, I think it's safe to say that they're going to be doing everything in their power to make the Vengestone buyer a brand new character, and maybe even give him the last elemental power. If they are going to be giving the last elemental power to the Vengestone buyer, I wouldn't be surprised, and I would love for it to be some type of future sight ability, as I think that would make the most amount of sense in the context of the current Ninjago storyline. As I said, it could tie up a lot of loose ends, and that would leave the door open for something new to come after the first season of 2022. It would be a conclusion to a lot of things in that way, which is one of the key words that Tommy Andreasen himself used to describe the next season, a conclusion of sorts. With that being said, you guys, that's basically going to wrap it up from my theory video here today. Just a quick one discussing whether or not the last elemental power will belong to the Vengestone buyer, and if it does belong to the Vengestone buyer, I have a feeling it's going to be some type of future sight ability. Leave all your thoughts down below in the comments regarding this, and let me know what power you think the Vengestone buyer is going to have, or just tell me what the last elemental power should be. Leave all your thoughts down below in the comments, you guys, and hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and check out the links down below in the description from other forms of social media. As always, big shout out goes out to my Patreon supporters, including once again the marvelous Jan. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video once again. My name is TannerFishies, and with that I bid you farewell.